Well, hello and welcome. I am Chris. I'm the pastor at Compass. As always, I am really glad that you're with me today. Now, when I was a kid, my church had a group for boys, and it was called Royal Rangers. And basically, Royal Rangers was Boy Scouts for church kids. And I hated it. I was what you might call a soft boy. I wanted to be in plays. I wanted to sing harmony in the all-boys choir that you could only be in until your voice changed. I liked dodgeball as much as the next kid, but I was not into camping or tying knots or carving things with a pocket knife. That was just not what I was into. So having to wear what was basically a military uniform with a red hanky around my neck and then do rough boy things every Wednesday night, that was not my jam. And at the beginning of Royal Rangers, every single week, we would all line up, and we would line up an arm's length apart from each other in the church basement. And once our lines were all set and straight, the Royal Ranger commander, he would call us to attention, and we would recite the Royal Ranger motto. And it went like this: ready for anything, ready to work, play, serve, obey, worship, live. And that's also how we said it. But then our commander would call us to parade rest, and we would learn how to, build a canoe out of a tree trunk, or practice ironing a perfect crease into our uniform pants, or punch each other. You never knew, because the whole point was to be ready for anything. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is telling his disciples about the importance of being ready for his return. It's the time when everything in creation is wrapped up in his return, and it's the renewal and restoration of everything into God's perfect design. Now, this is a little weird, and it can be tough to get your mind around. Even the Apostle Paul called all of this around the second coming of Jesus mysterious. But the one thing that isn't mysterious is why Jesus wanted his disciples and us to be ready. Because being ready for something is an important part of enjoying it and getting the most out of it. And it's very important to him, not just that we have a place in his kingdom, but that we fully experience what he has for us within it. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we have looked at the parables Jesus told, two of them in particular. One of them was about a wicked servant, and one of them was about 10 bridesmaids. And today we're going to continue with another story Jesus told about the importance of being ready for anything. And we're going to begin here in Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. Jesus said this. He said, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money." Now, as we get into this story, I just want to point out some details that I think are worth noting that will expand our understanding of everything that's happening here. And the first little detail is this: the master entrusted his servants with money based on their abilities. He didn't give them his money to keep it safe. He gave it to them to invest it, like it was their job. Their abilities are irrelevant if they're just going to sit on that money. But their abilities matter when they're investing it. And their responsibility to the master while he was away was to invest and increase his money. That was their job. And there's another thing in here that I want you to see. In the NIV translation of the Bible, which we just read, the money here was described as bags of gold. But in the Greek, originally it was actually called a talent. Now, a talent is a measurement of weight, like an ounce or a pound. Now, we tend to think of this as a generic measurement, like Jesus is just saying to the first servant, he gave 5 non-specific basic units. To the second, he gave 2 non-specific basic units. Like, what matters is the difference in the amount the servants were given. But when you hear this like Jesus' audience did, it changes things. Because, and get this, 1 talent of gold was worth around $2.8 million. That means this guy gave his first servant $14 million. These weren't just one little bag of coins. A talent was 75 pounds. And so 5 talents was 375 pounds of gold. And if you put all these things together, you can see that the master trusted his servants with an astonishing amount of wealth. Let's continue in verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold, he also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So we can see in this story that the first 2 servants, they did great. They each invested their millions of dollars, and each of them doubled what they started with. And as a result, the master praised them and he rewarded them. He invited them to party with him. What about the final servant? Well, let's look here in verse 24. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. The third servant, he was scared. And he went to his boss and he's like, sir, listen, I know how you get your wealth. I know that you get it from the investments that your servants make. But I was scared that if I lost any of the money you gave me, that you might be really mad. And so rather than risk any of it, I buried it so that you would get all of it back. And then I wouldn't get in trouble. So here it is. So the servant, he dug up the $2.8 million he started with, and he gave the original amount back to his master. Let's continue in verse 26. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Now, for the record, burying money was a key way of protecting it because no one could find it. So when you buried it, you were keeping it safe. But giving money to the bankers, it was actually one of the worst ways to protect it. Banks weren't really a big thing back then. They were just getting started, really. And Jesus, when he said this, he would have meant money changers. And money changers were these shady guys who extorted people with huge fees, and they were known to exploit every single opportunity they could get to make more money. Depositing money with a money changer was risky because there was no guarantee that you'd get it back. And giving a money changer $2.8 million and hoping they wouldn't skip town with it was about as risky as it gets. You would think burying the money to protect it would be better than giving it to a shady money changer. But it wasn't. And the master was mad that his servant didn't do anything with what he'd been given. Let's continue in verse 28. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Rather than being rewarded like the first servants were, this servant was punished. He's punished for not doing his job, for not investing what he was given. The kingdom of God is like an unimaginable wealth given to servants to invest according to their abilities. Those who do it will be rewarded, and those who don't will be left outside. Now, before we go any further, I need to clarify something. Not every detail in Jesus' stories has a spiritual implication or correlation. Meaning this, they don't all map out to some hidden truth. Sometimes a simple story has a simple point. Like when Forrest Gump said life is like a box of chocolates, his point was you never know what you're going to get. Nobody who saw that movie was like, okay, there are 24 pieces of chocolate in a box, and there's one box, and so 24 and 1. So that must mean that on January 24th, the 24th day of the first month, that Forrest is going to take over the government, and the government that has trapped us in their box because we're the chocolates and being oppressed. I don't know. Is that what it means? I mean, all that searching is unnecessary. The kingdom of God is not QAnon. This parable is simple. It has the same main point as the last 2 parables. You need to be ready because you don't know when Jesus will return. You don't need to dig any deeper. That being said, I do want to point out a few observations from this story that we can apply to our lives so that we can be ready when Jesus returns and our world is restored. And my first observation is this: it's that the kingdom of God is priceless. The amount given to the servants, it was unimaginable, easily the most valuable thing they had ever been given, maybe even seen. In the same way, the kingdom Jesus offers us is the most valuable thing we have ever been given. It's not just a religion we practice or a set of moral values that we follow. It is the work of restoration that God is doing in the world through his people, and it is of immeasurable worth. It is the forgiveness and transformation and redemption that he's offering everyone. And this priceless kingdom has been entrusted to us. God has placed into our hands something more valuable than anything else in our lives. The second observation is that the kingdom of God is both now and then. The servants were entrusted with the wealth of their master before he went away, and they waited for his return to gather it all up. God's kingdom is both something that we have been entrusted with now and something that will be fulfilled then when Jesus returns. Think of it this way: when a woman is pregnant, she's a mother. She doesn't just become a mother when her baby is born. Her child is going to eventually fully come into the world, but that doesn't mean the child's development in the mother's womb doesn't matter. The time between the pregnancy now and the child's birth then is still important. And in the same way, the kingdom of God, it's been conceived in the world, and we're also waiting for the day that it will fully arrive with Jesus. Which leads to my third observation, that the kingdom of God is a gift and a responsibility. Pregnancy is a gift, but every mother has a responsibility to care for it and protect the child in her womb. That child has become the most important thing in her life. And it's the same with the kingdom of God that's been given to us now. It's not a thing we can just bury to keep safe and then go on living our lives as if it isn't there. No, the kingdom God has entrusted us with is so valuable that it requires a change in how we live. Just like a pregnant mother, we have a responsibility to care for it, to see it grow, to adjust everything about how we live until it fully comes into the world. God has entrusted us with something of incalculable worth that will come into fruition someday. But until then, we have a responsibility to live into it, to invest in it, and see it grow. We aren't just biding our time on earth, waiting until heaven. What happens and what we do right now matters. Jesus has entrusted you with the kingdom of God. And the question is, what are you doing with it? Do you recognize its value? Do you orient your life around it, knowing you have a responsibility to live in this world as a kingdom person? Do you live like it is active and present right now? Do you treat the kingdom of God like it's the most valuable and precious thing in your life? Or is it an afterthought? Something you buried and only dig up on Sundays? When we don't understand the kingdom of God, it can be easy to bury it. And when we think it's just our ticket to heaven, when Jesus returns someday, it's easy to live our everyday lives like it doesn't matter. And when we think it's about avoiding the punishment of an angry God, it's easy to live in fear of him and reject the valuable and precious gift he's offering us. But the way to get ready for what God is doing in our world now and in the future is to live a life oriented around his priceless kingdom, knowing it's our first and most important responsibility. We get ready by understanding that the work of the kingdom is the most important job we've ever been given. Tending to it, living out its values, seeing it grow in our lives. And while we wait for the kingdom that was conceived in Jesus' death and resurrection, as we wait for it to be fully born into this world, we need to live like Jesus lived and think like he taught, or think like he thought and do what he taught. We need to be ready for anything. And whether you are a soft boy who wants to sing in a choir, or whether you are a rough boy who wants to tie knots and go camping, Jesus has a plan for you in his kingdom, and he's calling you and me and all of us to live it out in this world, to invest in it, and to see it grow in this space between when it was conceived and when it will be completely fulfilled in his return. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.